Thailand Ambassador to WTO, Pimchanok Vonkorpon Pitfield, sparked a diplomatic tension with India after accusing us of using subsidized rice procured for the public distribution system for capturing the export market. Thailand has alleged that India's rice is heavily subsidized, which gives it an upper hand in the international export market. The comment came during the meeting of the World Trade Organization in Abu Dhabi and was apparently cheered upon by countries like the United States, of course Canada and Australia. However, India did not take it lying down and lodged a strong protest against the statement. Indian negotiators also refused to participate in discussions where Thai representatives were present. Union Minister Piyush Goyal later said that India's stance is consistent and the world needs to see who is blocking the issues and why WTO work is not going on smoothly. India also batted for her Kisan at the WTO and said that India wants to ensure that all decisions taken at the WTO are keeping in mind the best interests of Indian farmers, India's fisherfolk and of course the people who run India. These comments also come a day after India called for a permanent solution for public stockholding for food security at the 13th Ministerial Conference of the WTO. To talk more about this and shed some more light towards these comments, these unsolicited comments that have been made against India, joining us is Mr. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, Mr. Ved Jain, senior economist, former vice president of ASSOCHAM, also with us on the program. Mr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, president, Center for Digital Economy Policy Research, also joins us on the program. Last but not least, Mr. Surinder Singh Lali, international affairs expert, also with us on the program. Mr. Bhattacharya, I'll begin with you. These comments are not only unsolicited, but they also, sort of display a large insecurity that exists considering how India has been able and consistently been able to capture the rice market. In fact, India is being accused of monopolistic policies. India is being accused of not following the WTO mandate, which of course are followed and respected by the world around. What do you think has been the reason for this kind of an accusation or an uproar in the WTO, and what does Thailand have to gain from it? We understand Canada, cheering on after these comments were made, but why the Americans and the Australians are also feeling this pinch? And if they have been, why haven't they said anything about it? In fact, these are some of the countries which enjoy India's rice exports.
Yeah, following WTO rules and being monopolistic are two different things. India has always and consistently followed WTO rules. In fact, I would say the accusation stands for the Western countries, but I'll not go into the details of that in the paucity of time. In terms of being monopolistic, if India is so, there is nothing illegal about it. That's something that we should all pat ourselves in the back for. It's great to be monopolistic in the global world. There are many things on which many countries are monopolistic about. If you look at single aisle aircraft for regional transportation, it's Europe and US who are monopolistic on it. They determine the prices, they deliver whatever they want to deliver. And so on and so forth for many goods. There's nothing wrong in being monopolistic. Now, India is definitely defining the pricing in the global market. We have now the heft to be able to take away price available in the global market because of our domestic requirement. If our people need the food, should we be exporting the food? It's a big question mark. Now, if we don't export the food when our own people need it, obviously there is a price rise in the global market. When there is a price rise, it hits everyone and everybody. Now, Thailand obviously is one of the largest consumer of rice, besides China. Many of the Eastern countries are one of the largest consumers of rice, and therefore they do get hit when these vagaries that happen when India starts exporting rice and when India stops exporting rice. And frankly, it does happen at a short notice, but it is for India's own interest. And that's exactly what all other countries do when it's in their interest. They take the policy measures that's important for them. Also, do keep in mind that farmers are an important constituency and a political constituency in any country. We see large protests happening in Europe, in France, and in other countries. That's the same dynamics that's playing around in Thailand. And therefore, when the rice price are going up and down, it's impacting the Thai farmers also. So it's a complex set of issues, and what they're trying to do at this point in time is finding a common cause between disparate set of countries and trying to corner India. And that clearly is not a fair thing to do.
All right, you're right about that. Mr. Jain, if you're there with us?
Yeah, I'm there with you.
Mr. Jain, in fact, there has been a ban on export of rice, to keep the domestic consumers, in tune with their needs and demands. And India has still been able to feed a number of countries like Vietnam and Nepal. The WTO does not recognize, does not see all these, benign gestures and programs that India has been, very delicately handling, and yet we are being accused here.
You see, for every country, the first and prime importance is its own country. Now, you cannot export when you need something for yourself. See, it's a basic principle which applies to everyone. If I need something, I will keep it for myself, why I will export it. So if there is a issue in the rice production and the consumption is going, then obviously the country will like to protect its interests, protect its countrymen, protect its farmer. That's why I don't think there is any challenge to that on that issue. I believe the recent dispute which we are talking about has been arising on account of a subsidy. They say that whatever is public stock holding, that is being exported and that being subsidized. I think that's a controversy which has arisen yesterday at the WTO. The Thailand has been taking up the issue.
Mr. Lali, how do you see this situation? There's obviously, a level of hypocrisy that is being missed out over here by the Western countries. This is nothing short of bullying. This is nothing short of basically agitating India where it has to take a stand, which wasn't required.
Thank you, Vineet. Firstly, it's a pleasure and honor for me to be here, and I'm going to wear my शायरी hat instead of my geopolitical hat and say कि एक इतनी सी बात समुंदर को खल गई, एक इतनी सी बात समुंदर को खल गई कि ये कागज की नाव उस पे कैसे चल गई. So when in 75 years we become bigger an economy than England who ruled us, when UPI becomes bigger than MasterCard, and over 45% of the global digital transactions are with India, I think there is a larger issue, and allow me to take this from the top. These are just tools that the West employs, be the World Bank or be the IMF or WTOs, in order to keep a country like India in check. Because if you see, even for that matter, the Niger controversy, or even for that matter, the Pannu controversy. I have respect for dignity of labor, and they were fine people. But Plumber, who was caught with AK-47, became an issue because they were getting back to us because we disturbed their apple cart in the Ukraine war. They just wanted us to become an ally, which they do with a lot of other European countries who simply sign the dotted lines even without filling in. And then the United States goes on and attacks Iraq for reasons best known to them, or wherever they've gone and destroyed economies which were even economies then, and they converted them into Stone Age. Afghanistan, they came, they turned bigger rocks into smaller, they came to kill Taliban, they gave back their ammunition to Taliban, leaving their mess in our part of the world to deal with. So for me, I look at this as a larger tool to control the new emerging India, which wants to be, which does not want to be an ally, but wants strategic autonomy. So these will be things that they will use to control us. But rest assured, our foreign minister, and especially Piyush Goyal himself, happens to be a qualified chartered accountant, so he probably understands the digits and the numbers very well. And backed by the Modi government, I think our nimble and deft foreign minister really knows how to give it back to them. So I think these are tools that they will use against us. And I think we are more than capable to fend for ourselves, because over this weekend, I was at a conference of artificial intelligence. Wait till we rule the world on that account, because that's where India is going to be the next soft digital power. Thank you, Vineet.
Gautam Mukherjee also joins us. Gautam, it is also beginning to look like India has a problem with the Americans as well, and the Americans have a problem with us when it comes to the WTO. India has been complaining for a while that members of the appellate tribunal have been blocked by the Americans. It's a rarity that a country is named in such negotiations and such back and forth. But the fact of the matter is that WTO also needs to keep the global south in mind, which predominantly India is trying to serve at this particular zone.
Well, Vineet, there are two lobbies. One is the American one, which sort of subsumes the Europe within it, Western Europe. And then there's the Chinese lobby. Now, both of them would like to be able to dominate India into a position that suits them. Now, this has been tried in the past. In earlier regimes, it might have succeeded, but in the last 10 years, it simply doesn't, because we know the rules and we use them to our benefit. We are not out of order in terms of the actual rules, and we do not succumb to pressure just because it's there, because we view the world multilaterally, and the world as such has responded on that basis. So if US doesn't cooperate, France does. If France doesn't cooperate, Israel does. Somebody or other is there, and plus our own development within the country, our formidable domestic consumption, which is what keeps us out of these people's clutches. Normally, you come under pressure when you want to export something to their country and you depend on it. Now, that is not going to happen. Thailand tried it on at the WTO by claiming that we export highly subsidized rice because they apparently can't. Well, it's a long story on subsidized rice, but then who isn't selling subsidized farm product? So you can't have a sort of rule book for the West or the rule book for China and the rest be damned. As Mr. Singh just pointed out, the global south is also very important and is going to grow agriculturally more and more important. India has championed the global south, and though we do not make this a kind of a militant cartel, we are definitely interested in a more equitable world order, and we are working to it. They may not like it, but they're going to have to lump it. Vineet.
Mr. Bhattacharya, this is also about India's growing clout, isn't it? This is also about India wanting its own space, its own opinion, which is, of course, pro-China, very heavily in the WTO. So India is trying to, in fact, put a leg in there, and that seems to be the problem.
That's what I said, that the East and the West is getting together to corner India, because India is now showing its heft and is standing up for what is important for India. Let me lay threadbare how ridiculous these conversations and charges are at the global level. Thailand is one of the exporters of rice. So if somebody is exporting subsidized rice, and for a moment let's assume that's true, then it's impacting Thailand. Fair enough. What is impacting US? US is not even the top 10 producers of rice. If it's getting cheap rice, it should be happy. Now you look at it from Indian government perspective. Why would the poor of India, we may be a rich country, but we're a rich country of poor people. Why will the poor of India subsidize the food of the rich? Under no circumstances is that happening. There are input subsidies being given, as in cheap fertilizers to the farmers, but the allegation from the Thai government is that the Indian government is procuring these grains at a cheaper rate, storing it, and then selling it in the public market. That is clearly not happening. The Indian government is procuring these grains, storing them, and whatever is not procured by the Indian government is what is being exported. And these are two different things completely. The other allegation, also a parallel conversation going on, is that there should be a cap on how much food grains can be stored in a country. So they want to limit the food security in an environment where there is climate change going on. We don't even know whether the productivity of the field will stay the same the next year or next to next year. Civilizations have collapsed because of climate change in the past, and we are being armed, twisted, and forced to reduce our stock levels because that's what WTO says. Now, 16% of the global population, we are saying, will be left to the vagaries of unknownness and to the generosity of the West, who themselves have turned around multiple times and said no to the requirements of the developing countries, including vaccines, where India freely gave these vaccines. They were stored, not given to the smaller countries who needed it, and after a year and a half when the vaccines expired, millions and millions of these vaccines were dumped in the sea without giving it to those who need it. So this is the kind of behavior from the West. Don't we deserve to protect our interests? Don't we deserve to protect our poor? Shouldn't we take up the policies which are important for the food security of our people, for the healthcare of our people? And that's exactly what's happening in the global arena. If the Thai government and the US government are trying to find common cause on cheaper rice, that is ridiculous. They are two different sides. One is the buyer, one is the seller. Why does cheap rice impact US at all? It does not. It should not. So this is, a bordering ridiculousness, the kind of conversation and architecting of the narrative that's going on.
Well, Gautam, the developed countries for a very, very long time, and that's exactly what India has also been saying, and they've benefited from all these policy tools which are available at the WTO, to further their new industries. And a lot of these tools have benefited a lot of these development countries. But now the irony is that the same members are kicking the ladder away from countries who want to use these tools. Isn't this exactly the case that we're talking about here?
Yes, and it is something we are very familiar with in forum after forum. And the main difference is our policy now clearly states, without embarrassment or hesitation, that we will do what suits India first. If in the process we are also able to help other people, so be it. But it's not going to be that we will fall in line with what you say just in order to please you, and then you do not reciprocate in any manner whatsoever. This is what has happened for years together. You're penalized if you do not belong to such bodies. At the same time, when you do belong to them, if it is a bully club, then we are now big enough to withstand the pressure and keep growing in our own space. Like I said before, the main reason why we are able to withstand the pressure is because of the size of our domestic economy, our considerable internal demand, our growth rates, all of which are not particularly dependent on what these people do or do not do. In defense, we are reducing our dependence as well. Of course, we have a very long way to go, but good beginnings have been made. We already make 1 lakh crore worth of defense equipment in India. The defense minister said we are going to take this up to 3 lakh crore. We are beginning to export in at least a visible way. It's under 20,000 crores today, but is poised to grow to large numbers because we are cost efficient and we are technologically advanced. So it's only a matter of time before the Western defense manufacturers, who are extremely expensive and dependent on orders from outside of the West to survive, let alone prosper, because they already have what they need. They only need to update from time to time. Unless they sell, then the entire armaments industry, like Rafale, was closing down. Dassault Rafale was closing down. Thanks to Qatar, Egypt, and India, it has got a new lease of life. America, similarly, has a lot of equipment of its own, but unless it sells to the rest of the world. So this kind of, if you like, reverse pressure that they are feeling for the first time, not only just from India, but also from a number of other countries such as Brazil, Argentina, Egypt. Everybody is now looking to their own national interest at the first, and then to cartels and pressures which threaten them partially with sanctions, partially with trade embargoes, and this whole architecture of international commerce, which was established after the Second World War, is starting to break down. And will have to be revamped. Another thing is, of course, the UNSC, which hasn't been reformed. There is a big case for reform. The 5 veto powers simply ignore all the bits, and occasionally one or the other will say, yes, we back India's inclusion or Brazil's inclusion, but that's as far as it goes. They actually do nothing about it collectively, which means that it's lip service. So this is the kind of thing that's going on. Now, if they do not operate in the WTO, inevitably there will be parallel organizations, regional organizations, and life will go on, and not on their terms.
All right. Mr. Lali, there is obviously a lot of hypocrisy, like I mentioned earlier on as well. When the farmer protest was happening, a lot of these countries made a hue and cry about it. When India wants to support these very farmers, they have a problem with the subsidies. Let us also not forget that, India has always been a champion for the underdog. You saw what happened at G20 as well. India wanted to support the African Union, and that's exactly what India did. Now, India also has brought out this topic at the WTO that there are 22 countries, who've been waiting to get into the WTO so that they can also use the benefits that the other countries, these so-called countries who are targeting us today, have enjoyed. But that doesn't seem to be finding any echo here. So how is this hypocrisy supposed to be exposed, and how do you think it's already been exposed by what Mr. Goyal also said in that presser?
Vineet, I think the hypocrisy is going to end up exposing by itself, as Gautam Mukherjee said. It's the figures that speak. I mean, it's 600, 700 million of middle class, which is probably one of the biggest markets. Where else in the world can you find 700 million people, the middle class, a total of 1.4 billion people under one elected democratic government where English is a language? So they need us now. I mean, what I also feel that there's the American hegemony and the American supremacy is really up for revision, because for the longest time, they've been ruling the roost and they've been simply calling the shots. And if I was to use my rudimentary study on my last trip to the US, which was a couple of months ago, I mean, their infrastructure is falling apart. I mean, yes, they did a great job back then in the days, but there aren't no new bridges happening. There aren't new roads happening. I mean, and a lot of wealth generation is happening in this part of the world.
Absolutely.
So, we're in the middle of a little proxy war between, the Chinese camp and the American camp, and India is too big and too important to be ignored. And while we do that, we're building our own soft industry also. I mean, pharmacy to the world and backroom office to the world. So I feel that we don't have to do much, because as the previous panelist said that, our current dispensation knows we don't buckle up to their pressures. If we have to buy the LS-400s, we'll buy. If we have to buy oil, we'll buy. Our ministers are on record saying across the globe that for us, it is our middle class, our population first. We're not going to...
Right, Mr. Lali. You're absolutely... Yeah, Mr. Lali, you're absolutely right. Let me also quickly just take a concluding thought from Mr. Jain as well on this. Mr. Jain, your parting thoughts on this hypocrisy that India has exposed.
See, the issue what we need to understand is the WTO is for a fair trade practice, and in the fair trade practice, the controversy is arising how to address the food security of the developing nation. That's the issue which is at the core of the dispute with there. And when we talk of the fair trade practice, the issue is whether a country can subsidize the product which is exporting, particularly agriculture, on that issue. Because every country, in order to address the larger issue, political as well as the concern for the farmers, intend to push up the export for the and subsidize it. That's a challenge which is there on this issue. And that's, I think, somewhere some balance has to be struck. Because on the one hand, there are developing nations, there are the developed nations. So as the other panelist has said, so long it suits the developed nation, they say it's fine. The moment it says, it doesn't suit them, they say it is something wrong. And that is exactly what is happening now in the WTO at Abu Dhabi.
Absolutely.
Why this controversy has arisen in Abu Dhabi? Mainly because now India was placed in a much better position as compared to other countries. So now they have raked up this issue that your public stock holding is a matter of which by the way which you give a subsidy, and that's why you are pushing up your export agriculture produced in the world. And that's why the Thailand is concerned, because Thailand is another country which is exporting rice to a larger extent on that issue. So it is basically propped up by the developed nations, with Thailand took the stand that way. And my concern will be, let's a fair trade practice, and it should balance the interest of the developing and the developed nation both, as well as the food security, which is the prime importance of each of the country. So absolutely. India cannot sacrifice the food security for its people of 140.
You're absolutely right, sir. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Would like to thank all my guests for being a part of this very intellectual conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.